Welcome everybody for our like a 1.5 hour talk and a discussion on the how to protect our mind during the time of the COVID-19. So I'm particularly grateful to Professor Shyam Fernando, a friend and a colleague from the Faculty of Medicine that I work with, for initiating this talk for the entire University of Colombo and the staff and students. We are also planning to record it so that it will be put up in the main university website for anybody who could access it, who wants to access it on a later date. So really why we are meeting today is that in most of our lives, we have, if you look at all our lives, we are going through quite an unprecedented and quite a different experience than any of us have ever experienced. We know that all of us have gone through difficult times, such as, for example, personal challenges, or being exposed to a conflict, like a war, or maybe personally traumatic issues such as sexual violence, etc. However, this kind of a global level where things are so different to what we know of reality, I'm sure none of us have ever gone through something like this. And because of that, we could have certain psychological responses. And what would these psychological responses be? Usually, people would have a lot of anxiety, worry, and fear. We know that anxiety, worry, and fear are quite related to each other. Usually, fear is an exaggerated version of anxiety and worry, and all these three permutations of the same phenomena can be very debilitating. Others could also experience irritability and anger. We do know that from the current research on the psychological impact of the pandemic, that anger levels, particularly in relationships, in intimate relationships, have been in the increase. So if I was reading a research done in Canada where there's a more report of marital conflict, and I think the same has been reported in China. So, being constantly with the same people and not having avenues to express our, usually felt defilements, and having to, kind of sustain it within ourselves, could have an impact on relationships in the form of anger. Then loneliness, we do know that this is particularly so in younger people. We hear a lot of younger people saying, we came to university, we've met friends, but now we don't know when we'll see them, though we might meet them virtually. And then loneliness from not being able to stick to your usual routine can be also, kind of making you feel a little bit not yourself. The loneliness is an indicator. And of course, loss or separation. If somebody known to you or you yourself has been in a quarantine context, or if you've lost somebody during these times and you haven't been able to mourn properly, so you could feel it more than before. Some people might not really note any psychological responses, but they might feel physically very tired for no reason. So you might be sleeping quite all right, you may be eating healthy, but you might feel really physically tired. So it could be actually an indicator of your psychological status, which is indicated physically. So other than these difficult emotions, we also know that there are certain particular groups of people who might feel this pandemic situation more than others. For example, if you were a person who had been subjected to physical, sexual, financial, or emotional violence at home pre-pandemic time, it is quite expected, unfortunately, that this violence could increase during the pandemic. We have seen world over that women and children have always experienced more violence in the hands of others in times of a traumatic event, such as, say, a pandemic. If you have been taking substances, and we know that no kind of substances, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or drugs, is useful at all. But if you had been utilizing this, and now you find yourself in a pandemic situation, it could have consequences. If you're an older person who used to like socializing, meeting your neighbors, being connected to people, or if you're an older person living by yourself and your family is not with you and you can't reach them because of physical distancing, this might have a greater impact on our current situation. If one is a daily wage earner, the financial strain of it, we know that poverty and inequality have a huge impact on somebody's mind. So if one is a daily wage earner, just those social determinants itself can have a psychological. And if you're a business owner, obviously you will have a lot of strain, particularly if you do not have a huge profit base or capital to draw from to pay your salaries, uh, workers' salaries, for example. I was somebody was telling me today that in the US, 15% has unemployment, and they expect it to go up to 25%. That's a huge rate, even for the US. And what would be for our countries? So if you're a business owner, and sometimes, for certain people, if one has gone through a previous stress or a trauma, such as, say, being exposed to the tsunami, exposed to a flood, or had been, say, raped or been exposed to a bomb blast or a grenade attack, those previous stresses and traumas might resurface during this time. It's a very complex thing. However, I must also say that in the UK, a recent research done, a large-scale academic research piece of study that has been done, it showed that whilst 14% of the UK population uh, had reported significant psychological strain during the COVID-19 pandemic, 25% of persons reported minimal, if at all, psychological strain. So that shows that not everybody would undergo psychological strain during a pandemic such as this. In fact, there is 25%, a huge population of people, a group of people who actually is not really touched by it negative, which is an excellent thing. They found out that this 25% actually are people who are somewhat older, so their perspective in life might be quite different, and the circumstances might be different, and the way they look at life and engage with life may be different. So what it really shows is that none of us really need to go through humongous psychological strain because of the pandemic. And what is really interesting is that we could learn strategies to really protect our mind. And what we want from today's webinar is to share these strategies with you as much as we can in the 1 hour that I'm going to talk to you, as well as to encourage you to share these strategies with others that you know. And this recording that we're also having will be put up on the UOC website. So without much ado, let's go down to these strategies. There are quite a few. So I'm going to start with things that I have priorities as important. We might not be able to run through all in 1 hour, but let me go through as much as I can, and then we'll take questions till 5:30. So I think the first thing that we really need to understand in any psychological management is really how we look at life, isn't it? I mean, we can have strategies after strategies. We can put effort after effort to manage our mind. But if our overall attitude and perspective in life is always a bit down and out or gloomy, however much strategies you learn from, you might not be able to optimally put it into effect. And I think, therefore, this first strategy of realizing is really important to put your mind straight. So, for example, if you intend to go to Anuradhapura, and if you're not looking in the direction of Anuradhapura while living in Colombo, instead looking at Point Ped or say looking at Gaul, certainly you're not going to end up in Anuradhapura because you are looking at Gaul. So similarly, what is this attitude of mind that you need to have? What is the overall perspective? And that is that human life is always part with challenges. You may not like it, but the truth is that there's always a down when there is an up. So for example, if we are going to climb a mountain and we're really looking forward to it, we always find the upward climb really fun because each step you take, you see more and more and more, like this person in this picture. And when you go to the top, it's so fantastic. You see things that you've never seen before, like an eagle seeing the whole panorama. But we do know that we have to come down as well. And coming down is actually tough because you can slip down all the way down. There can be thorns, you may stumble on a rock. So there are also the pitfalls of coming down. And that is life for everybody. It's the inevitable truth of life, whether we like it or not. So a pandemic As with any other personal or historical challenge humans have had, is also the down part. We can't expect our life to go from up to up to up. It doesn't happen like that. So if we were to revisit, we know that in the 1980s, 1918, there was a pandemic, a flu pandemic, where a lot of people were affected. So pandemics, therefore, is not an uncommon thing. It comes few and far between, but it comes nevertheless. And even in our own life, or historically, or even in our own countries or regions, negative events had been a part of positive events. So you really need to reorient your mind for this truth of life. Within that context of really, like the way your perspective on life, you need to now start utilizing certain strategies so that your mind is functioning optimally to tide through this time. So now the remaining time that I have, I'm going to talk to you about the strategies. But remember, it is actually the perspective that has to be set. So living in the present, how would you do that? That is, if I was to offer you 17 strategies, which I'm going to do, if it's one thing that you really want to try, is this particular one. So living in the present is actually just keeping your mind on whatever activity you're doing. We do know that the human mind does not really want to live in the present. It prefers to live in three other places. And what are those three other places? They like to live in the future. So, really fantasizing what you're going to eat when it's your day of the ID card to go out of your house. Living in the past, that is, what was your life like in February 2020 before this whole thing collapsed on you? Or the fantasy when you are thinking about that Nobel Prize you're going to get because you just discovered the vaccine and you're not even in vaccine area of study, but you can fantasize anyway. So our mind is quite inclined to go towards the future, the past, the fantasy because it keeps getting entertained in those areas. However, a very healthy mind does not tolerate these three places. Rather, a healthy mind likes to live here. So if I was to think of my present now, my present is just looking at a blank screen with a PowerPoint slide with Sham's photo on the right side, and that's it. And I have a light in front of me. I see my window on the right side, and I'm just talking to you. So that is my present. So if you could train your mind to live in the present, and how would you do that? Every time your mind wanders to something that is nothing to do with what you're doing now, gently to bring it back to the present moment. So, for example, you are cutting carrots in the evening to make a curry for yourself. You're finishing off some work in your laptop because you need to submit something to your head of department, or you're putting water to your pots and pans or your plants. Usually, we do these things in automatic pilot mode. But a person who is living in the present does it with full awareness, with full comprehension. They know that they're cutting the carrot. They know that they're typing away at their keyboard. They know that they have just filled water into their bucket and that they're walking towards the plants to put it. So what this living in the present, what it means is therefore, is that a person keeps his or her mind in the activity what they're doing. When you keep on practicing living in the present, what happens is that a person begins to tolerate negative emotions of anxiety, worry, or anger. If I was to give you an analogy, say you have a really good roof in your house. It is so strong, really well there. Whatever rains, or whether it's a tornado or a hailstorm or whatever comes, you can sleep well that night because you know your roof is well thatched. A mind that lives in the present moment is like such a roof. It can tolerate the rains of anxiety and worry and anger and irritation, whatever, jealousy, whatever those unhealthy, unwholesome emotions. A mind that lives in the present discards them. It doesn't seep into the mind and overtake the mind. So, therefore, living in the present includes keeping your mind in the present activity you're doing. And when you keep on doing that, You might, in the initial weeks and months, or sometimes even years of your practice, you might still feel certain emotions trying to seep in, trying to take hold of you. For example, anxiety or frustration or anger or jealousy. You might even feel that these emotions are really overtaking you. You're in their throes. You were always in its throes, but now you can identify it. What you do in that moment is just put a word to that emotion. Anxiety, that's what you're feeling then. Frustration, irritability, anger, sadness, unhappiness, whatever it is, just note it. When you note and put a label by a name to an unhealthy, unwholesome emotion, what happens is you're distancing yourself from that emotion. When you distance yourself from that emotion, you get a moment, a window of opportunity not to act on that emotion. When you get a moment of opportunity not to act on that emotion, what happens is you would prevent untoward consequences if you had acted on that emotion. So you have a really great opportunity just to change the course of your life by doing this. Another positive of living the present is that a person becomes able to embrace their negative emotions, their unwholesome emotions, and with time, they can befriend their difficult emotions. So, for example, initially, a person who is anger prone, who's quite violent, might be in the throes of anger. They might say things, do things that they really regret later on. But as they keep on practicing living in the present moment, they could see the beginnings of anger at its very initial stages, and they're able to word it and let it be with them. They have to tolerate it rather than act on it. With time, they're able to embrace this anger emotion rather than acting on it. And with time, they're able to befriend this emotion, which is anger, which they didn't like before. They're able to befriend that as a part of them. Therefore, with time, what happens is when you live in the present moment, whatever negative emotions that are surging in you, you stop reacting to it. You start acting on it. And when you stop acting based on your unhealthy emotion, you have a lot of compassion towards yourself. You become self compassionate. You actually like yourself. And that's the greatest gift that we can have, isn't it? To be liking ourselves, because many people really don't like themselves. That's why they can't be alone. And when you truly like yourself, you also have great relationships with others because you have what we refer to as other compassion. So, living in the present, also referred to as mindfulness, is a very powerful strategy. It's one of the key psychological strategies that we teach to students, other people, patients in our practices. You could read more on it on the internet. So, let me go to the third strategy, which is also psychologically uplifting, is gratitude. Now, if you look at this particular situation that we find ourselves in, there is a certain segment of our professionals that we really are grateful for. I work at the Faculty of Medicine. I'm not a medical person. I work with many, many medical persons. I'm so grateful for the amount of commitment that they have for their laboratory testing or procuring the required equipment, seeing patients, running their OPD clinics, running their ward, and really looking after themselves and giving their best to patients. Other than that, we also have administrators who are running our country doing their very best. Then we have the fruit sellers, the vegetable sellers that are coming to our door. Certainly, they're also making a living, but they're also making our lives much easier too. What about the garbage cleaners who come and take our garbage and even put their hands into our garbage sometimes, knowing that there might be a used mask, which we are mortified to touch, isn't it? But they do it anyway. And the janitors, the cleaners, various people, the public health midwives, public health inspectors doing a great job. So really, whenever we feel down and out, whenever we feel that, oh, I wish this pandemic was not there, or I wish I could do whatever I used to do, I wish I could go out to the park for a walk, or I wish I could go and visit my friend for a chat and a gossip. Whenever your mind goes down, remembering those people with gratitude who is helping us to keep our system going uplifts us. So our sense of gratitude towards others heals us too. What is much more important is that when we feel gratitude towards the health professionals, the administrators, the garbage collectors, we also feel inclined to take protective measures for our own selves and for the society. And those are the people who are conscientious about hand washing, keeping the 1 meter distance, not touching the face, not breaking the curfew. You become a person who is also others are grateful for. Why? Because you're keeping the system going. Therefore, gratitude is an excellent protector of the mind. Linked with gratitude is counting our blessings. Now, I find that in the Asian region, particularly in Sri Lanka, I haven't lived in other countries that much, so I wouldn't know. But we are quite inclined to be grumpy, isn't it? We are always trying to count what we don't have and always wanting more and more, but not really appreciating what we have. Now, this counting of blessings is something that goes contrary to it. It is about considering consciously what we have. So, having a gratitude journal, we call it gratitude journaling in psychology, is something that really is a booster to our mind. So, what is a gratitude journal? At the end of the night, every night, having a little book, or if you are into using more phones and tabs or whatever, you can even keep a little journal in that way, where you write down 3 things in your day, in that particular day, that you were grateful for. So if I were to look at my day today, what was it that I was grateful for? I'm doing a small project with some colleagues, and I'm really grateful that they included me into that project. And so the fact that I have kind colleagues I could work with is one thing that I'm grateful for today. Second thing is, I'm really grateful I have a laptop. I finished my work for my colleagues. I'm glad that I'm connected with the internet. So I'm grateful for that. Third is, after this webinar, I'm going to have this, I decided what I'm going to have to drink afterwards. I'm grateful I have everything at home to make that drink for myself, a coffee drink. And I'm grateful for that. So they're really simple things, but those are the things that made my day today. So if I were to keep gratitude journal, I will write that thing down. 3 things, not 2 things, or not 4 things, just 3 things at the end of the night. When you frame your mind positively before you go to sleep in the night, you get up with a positive frame of mind in the morning. And if you keep on doing that week after week, at least for a month, you will see a change in you, how you get up in the morning, how you go into sleep in the night. And that can really change your mental atmosphere in your mind. 4 is humor. Now, you might obviously agree with me that Sri Lankans have the best humor. I mean, the worst thing can happen, and in 2 hours' time, you can get a whole bunch of stuff coming in, joking about everything under the sun. Like this, I think this particular thing I have for you is not from Sri Lanka, but it's the kind of thing that Sri Lankans are so good at. So humor may not be an obvious option in a pandemic situation, but it is. In fact, the father of modern psychology, Sigmund Freud, calls humor a healthy defense mechanism. It kind of softens our mind. So for example, if you have a huge mound of tough clay in your garden and you just can't break it out, what is the easiest thing to do? Put some water to it and the clay just dissolves. Healthy humor is a great softener of the mind, just as the water was for that tough mound of clay. So when I say healthy humor, the healthy part is really important because some of us find humor by making a joke at somebody else, Like a very common thing is making a joke at somebody's body size. Now that is not healthy humor, it's unhealthy humor because we are making somebody else a joke for our own happiness. But healthy humor is something innocent. We are not looking down on somebody, but we are just putting our minds up. So if you're a person who loves to listen to this sad, melancholic, distressing, or revengeful, aggressive movies or books or songs or dramas, I would really recommend that you don't go down that avenue too much. For example, there are people who love watching airplane crashes or all about the Nazis and how they killed kind of thing. Or they only watch about killing fields. So if you're into those kind of endeavors, it would have helped you in the pre-pandemic time, but rethink those now as their forms of entertainment. I would suggest that you switch to more lighter, more innocent, more humorous activities so that your mind is kept up rather than it going down. Spirituality is an obvious source of comfort for many people world over. That doesn't mean that if you are not a spiritual person, if you have not cited your place of worship all your life or nearly all your life, that you should suddenly go rushing there when the curfew lifts. No, it's not what we're talking about. I'm inviting you to really consider whether your spiritual beliefs, whatever it may be, can give you some comfort in this time. Because we do know that for world over, through generations, historically, spiritual beliefs and practices has been a great buffer in traumatic times. So it might just be, say, for example, reading a spiritual book of your interest or meditating like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like you may have done when you were a young person in school, or praying or reciting a gatha or a prayer or a stanza at home, just to experiment with it. And it doesn't mean that you do these things rote memory like a parrot, rather, really understanding what is in there, really thinking about it, really absorbing what's there in spirit to yourself and reflecting and see whether it could actually up your spirit. So, spirituality is an excellent protector of the mind, too. Now, altruism is another strategy. There are so many opportunities for being altruistic. During when this whole imposed curfew happened in March, one of my friends who's excessively sociable, loves to go out and very, very friendly, and you couldn't keep her at home for more than 2 days without her wanting to go out, was feeling quite down. And she was talking to me and she was saying, Pianjali, I don't know how long it's going to happen. And there's nothing to do. I only have time to watch movies, and movies are also really boring. How many movies can you watch? So anyway, we discussed certain things. I gave her a few strategies. And about 10 or 15 days down the line, I was just talking to her about some other thing. And she said, Angela, I feel really, really settled. And I asked, what is it? She said, you know what? I thought about it, and I thought about the fact that how grateful I must be. So she has used a strategy of gratitude. I'm grateful for the fact that I have a house. I have a salary coming to my account every month. I have friends, I have family who really loves me. I can all things I want. But there are so many people out there who don't have any of these things. So I made an effort that I'm going to look after these people through maybe like giving some money for the guys who come to take out the garbage, the three-wheeler stand outside her house, or contributing to a collective effort or doing some uh, food parcels. So what she had done since my first talk to her was really channeling her resources into looking after the needs of others, altruism. And she felt that by doing these things, it really lightened her heart. And she felt really good inside that she didn't have to watch movies over and over again just to go through the day. So I actually had a chat with her last week. Now this is about 2 weeks, 2 months into the curfew. And this person who was so unhappy in March was telling me, Pianjali, actually, this whole process have changed me as a person. I really have started to count my blessings, and I'm becoming more sensitive to other people. And I think this has been a great time for my own spiritual and psychological growth. So altruism, which means keeping aside your own self-centeredness, and giving to others, despite the fact that you also might need that extra onion or that few potatoes that you now have to give it to somebody else, but you give it anyway. Giving a part of yourself without keeping for yourself is a great uplifter of one's psyche. Being connected is another psychological strategy. We know that social support is a wonderful protector of the mind. Even the most introverted of human beings who love to spend time with themselves do want to connect to somebody who is trustworthy. Now, with this whole physical distancing situation, we of course can't meet people for that social support. However, that is why this term social distance was changed to physical distance, because social distance gave the implication that we mustn't keep social connection, and that is so wrong. What we should do is to keep the physical distance but continue our social connection. So social support is a wonderful protector of the mind, but we do know that we can't meet people physically. So we of course have to go to other means, so telephones, calling, texting friends and family, including those who are overseas. Usually what I do is for a week, I make a list of about 4 people that I want to connect to, other than my regular friends that I WhatsApp on or I connect on Facebook. So most of these people I connect are my parents, friends, they are older, aunts and uncles, my own relatives, or people who need some support because I know their mental health status is from the pre-pandemic time. So I actually make a list of them and I make a point just to connect with them and see how they are so that they feel buffered by somebody reaching out for them, and I feel good that I have reached out for them too. So both people actually benefit from it. Now, for younger people, if there are students who are listening to this, you could have a virtual meetup if you have that kind of internet connection. And I'm aware very well that some of us may not have that opportunities to have virtual meetups, because I've seen in certain setups, so because I think for Zoom, you get like certain free amount of time if you don't go through our learning management system, but outside 40 minutes free. So people meet up in that free time and meet up with friends, or creating WhatsApp groups to stay in touch, by posting uplifting messages on your social media platform. So all of these things are alternate ways of being connected. And being connected is so very important. The other day, one of my colleagues from a different working group that I'm working with just sent a text message since this curfews permutations was changed from this week, that she was a very very sociable person, but since these 2 weeks of 2 months of being at home without much, she hasn't really reached out to people, and now she feels quite strange. How am I going to go out to work, because she felt that her entire persona has changed. So it could be one of the reasons is that this entire shutting down of our social systems could have impacts like that. So you must not shut down your social systems, connect anyway. Another strategy is really to have some certainty. All of us want to have certainty in our lives. We thrive on certainty, though the bigger picture of the human life is uncertain, isn't it? I mean, if you look at the first strategy that I spoke about realizing that things come and things go, there are ups and that there are downs, shows us that things are rather uncertain. But within this large scale abstract uncertainty, we can have certainty too in our lives. And those would include constructive activities that you can complete in a day. So it's not that you would say, at the end of the pandemic, I would speak Mongolian extremely well. That's the language in Mongolia. So those are really big expectations on yourself. And sometimes I've seen people offering courses. They would say, be an origami expert by the end of the COVID-19, or learn to speak Mandarin like a Chinese. So those are like really big expectations, and there are these kind of things thrown at us. Do not set such big expectations on yourself, because it would be difficult given the circumstances we find ourselves. However, do put some achievable, fun goals. For example, I have this little picture of a father having a goal of spending 1 hour with his son, uh, helping him complete an activity he likes. So there's a certainty, isn't it? There's a great 100% kind of a chance that you can complete it. So therefore, this strategy is all about having some goals, but not huge expectations given the circumstances, but having a structure where there is certainty at the end of completing that. So it could be, I would plant 3 veggies, not 100 veggies in acres of land, but 3 veggies, and I would try to nurture them and grow them during these 2 months. It's something simple, but something achievable. have some circle like that in your life. Maintaining your daily routine. I'm sure all of you by now have heard of this strategy. I cannot emphasize it more because it is so easy for the human mind to plummet. It's like if there's a tank of water, it's so easy. There's a little hole in the tank for the water just to rush down rather than for it to go up. Whatever thing you make it to go up, it's so easy for it to go down. So similarly, if you don't make a conscious effort to maintain your daily routine, it is quite possible that as the days go on, you would find yourself in a total mess in the form of your routine. So for example, if you're used to getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, as the days go by, it might become 5:30, 6:37, 7:30. It just the whole thing now goes. Then from behind, you try to catch up. Sometimes you might watch movies the whole time, and then you go to sleep at 3 o'clock. Then your waking up becomes 10 o'clock. Then, for example, if you had done some form of exercise, you used to go out and walk 3 or 4 times a week. Now you started doing it only twice a week, then once a week, then you skip the whole week. If you're used to eating healthy, but now you just do something and or live off cups of tea because you can't be running behind vegetable trucks and fruit trucks. So what has now happened is that your entire pre-pandemic daily routine has gone out the window. Don't let that happen to you. You have to take control of it. So get up at the same time that you used to, go to sleep at the same time you used to pre-pandemic. But in between those slots of time that you used to use work or study, fix other activities. So anyway, being university staff, we anyway do online teaching, we anyway do national service work. So we have work. Students have a fixed schedule as well. So stick to your pre-pandemic structure. Exercise, if you had been doing exercise earlier, if you don't have opportunity to go out, there are so many exercise programs free on YouTube. 5 to 6 days a week. It may be difficult to do it at home, but do it nevertheless. Eating healthy is absolutely essential, even that if that means you run behind various vegetable and fruit truck. You could still go out to buy essential food now with their last identity card number. So get into your usual structure. Don't deviate. Exposure, media exposure. There are so many people who know so many things about the COVID-19. The whole world seems to be knowing their own thing. And there is so much of fake news going on, isn't it? I mean, from the most craziest to something that seems very obvious, but it is fake. So it's really important that we limit our media exposure to maybe twice a day. So if you are in the habit of putting your TV on from morning till evening, listening to every breaking news and analyzing it, and then calling up people and informing them about this, seriously consider not doing that. So your media exposure to the COVID should at maximum be twice a day, and that too to proper sources of information. So in our country, we have the Ministry of Health as an excellent epidemiology unit, the Sri Lanka Medical Association, World Health Organization. Those are reputed organizations, not the forward messages that we get on WhatsApp or Viber or Facebook, which claim so many things. Recently, I got a forward message, same message about thrice, about the various steps of the process of opening up the curfew. And the dates didn't quite add up to 11th of May that was happening in Sri Lanka. So I asked these people, are you sure this is correct? They said, yes. I said, but this says it's opening up on 18th of May. Then they checked back and they were forwarding some items that was coming from the UK. Highly irrelevant to us. But they were just haphazardly forwarding and confusing everybody. It's really important that we stop that cycle at us. I always question people who send me questionable bits of information. I ask them gently, this is true, have you verified it? I wonder from where you got it. So that we put a kind of a stop to this unnecessary fake news circulating. Sharing information. Now, we think that many people know about hand washing, not touching the face, not touching the eyes, wearing the necessity of wearing a mask, we think that by now, after the media informing them so much, that people would know this. But actually, people don't. So, for example, yesterday, I had to go and buy some groceries, and the cashier who was helping me knew nothing about many of the things that has been told to our people over and over again. So I had two options. Either I could have gone off that supermarket, done my sanitizer, and gone off home, or I could have informed him. So I told him, well, why don't I give you the credit card and I'll put it in the credit card machine so that you don't have to touch it. It will safeguard you as well. And then I will take out the credit card. So that was, he didn't know about that option. Then when he gave me the pen to sign it, I said, well, I brought my own pen. Why don't you ask people to also bring their own pen? Or if you give yours, kind of sanitize it and reuse it. He didn't know that information. So sharing information is really useful for our entire community, and that has to be done. That's another strategy where we are also keeping everybody in the loop, which is also good to our minds because we are also being altruistic. Commenting others, people who are in quarantine now, there's a lot of stigma, unfortunately, directed towards people who have got the COVID-19, who are in quarantine. We have seen certain media reports of the media going to places of people who have got the virus, and really showing their whereabouts, their houses, the neighbors. Now those are wrong media reporting tactics, because people have their own privacy. We need to, and this is, anybody could get the COVID-19. So going there and hassling them is not something that we should do and not something that we should accept. Rather, if somebody is isolating or in self-quarantine, to really support them by keeping food outside their houses is what we need to go, because otherwise, if you stigmatize people for the condition they have got, then we are giving the message to our community that if by any chance you have the signs and symptoms of the COVID-19, you shouldn't come out, because they are afraid of the same stigma and discrimination directed towards them and their community. So commending them, helping them. In fact, one of my friends who is in the US just WhatsApped me a few days ago and said, is it true we see all these reports coming from Sri Lanka? They're showing people who had got the disease, how the health officials are going to their houses, the media is behind them with cameras. We're really amazed, because here in the US, if we know somebody has got it, what we do is we call them, we ask them, can we cook you something? We cook it and come and keep it outside your house, we cook it up. That's how supportive we are. We are really surprised that Sri Lanka is like this. So we really need to change our views on people who have got the disease, help them and not stigmatize them. So commending them is absolutely essential. Now, older adults could be quite stubborn when it comes to maintaining physical distancing, maybe because of certain cognitive reasons or because they're not really used to living this kind of new life. So, for example, I know older people who would want to go to the next door neighbors and have a chat. So I would tell them, why don't you call and have a chat? Because you can't go out. No, I want to go out. Or I want to go to the temple, but you can't go to the temple. But no, I want to go to the temple. So being quite stubborn and want to stick to their already existing routines. Um, Working with older people can be sometimes difficult. So what I try to do with older people who don't want to really stick to the health regime and the health advice of, say, physical distancing and not going out during curfew is, I try to reason with them and say that, well, you as an older person, if you act as a role model to others in your neighborhood, they would also know that, hey, this lady is doing like this gentleman is doing like this, we should also be like that. So that kind of reasoning practice over some time might bring some sense into older adults who are not very inclined to keep into the health advice. Now, I want to go through something that about children and how we could help children to manage this. There's a lot of information on psychological strategies that we could use with children. But because it's nearly 5 o'clock and we might want some time to ask questions, I will talk about children and maybe stop the presentation, go on to questions. But let me talk about the children's psychological health, because some of you who are listening here may be working with children, have children, or who know young people, etc. So the question is, do children need to be made aware that there is a pandemic? Of course. By now, children know that some drastic changes have happened in their life. And if we don't sit down and talk to them at their developmentally appropriate age, they're living in uncertainty, isn't it? So, for example, if we are told just to stay at home and we don't know why exactly, or little bits of information is given and we're told to stay at home, we feel anxious. Children are the same. So children need to be made aware that there is a little germ out there, though it's a little one, it's a huge impact. So we need to look after ourselves. We need to care for ourselves. So for some time, we're going to be here. So giving children information about the pandemic at the age appropriate way, of course, 5-year-old is different to 15-year-old, has to be done. Children need reassurance that things are going to be okay. But that doesn't mean we lie to them and say everything is going to be perfect from June, because we don't know whether it's going to be perfect from June. We don't know whether it's going to be perfect in September. So giving false promises is not what is meant by reassurance. Reassurance is saying that I know it's difficult. I know you want to go to school. I know you want to talk to your friends. I know it's tough. I'm there for you if you're going to be there for them. So reassurance is not making blanket promises, but saying things that you as a parent or an adult can do for the child and that you will keep to. Routine for a child is really important. Design their routine with them. So, of course, we now know with the home learning packs and lessons coming through, a child would be having a routine some part of the day, but make their routine a fixed one. So, for example, you would do some part in the morning, then some part in the late afternoon, some part in the night, in a very ad hoc manner, where the date on the day only you change. Don't have a routine like a timetable, but not so strict like what it was when school was there. Do it with your child. So the child also has a say in their routine and then stick to it. Just as I talked about structure for us as adults, structure for children are so important. Emotional regulation. We would know that children will have emotional difficulties during this time. We also have emotional difficulties. Even before the pandemic, we used to get annoyed, we used to get angry, we used to get jealous, we used to get sad. Just as that, we also have those feelings now, and children have it too. I feel that this is a great opportunity to teach children how to regulate their emotions. So I saw some parents known to me, when the child is, for example, what is emotional regulation? Let's think about that first. Emotional regulation means helping a child to manage their unhealthy, unwholesome emotions in a way that it's not harmful for him, harmful for another person. How do you first do that? You help the child name the emotion they're having. So if the child is having a temper tantrum, maybe not at the time of the tantrum, but later on you ask the child, do you know how you felt? How did you feel that emotion in your body? What do you call that emotion? It's anger. Or when the child is really sad and crying, afterwards you could talk to the child, what was the emotion? I feel sad, because it's unhappiness. So really help the child name various emotions, And maybe at the end of the day, you could ask the child, what are three main emotions you felt today? So the child becomes very aware of picking emotions. For example, a 6-year-old known to me was having a bit of a temper tantrum. This is pre-pandemic. I had gone to their house and he was sitting in a corner and doing his thing. So I asked him, Puta, how things? He said, Auntie, I'm a bit angry. So I'm taking some time off to manage myself. And this is like a 6-year-old. I was amazed. He identifies emotion. He felt that he needs to take some time to manage himself, and he was doing just that. So emotional regulation involves a person identifying the emotion, knowing the varied emotion, and identifying itself has a great capacity to tolerate the emotion within themselves. So emotional regulation could be taught during this time. Giving playtime. limiting screen time is absolutely important, but not limiting too much if that is the only way the child has contact with the friends. But even if screen time is given to contact friends, parental supervision is absolutely essential. Disciplining is a topic that we really need to talk about, because we know that in times of stresses, child directed violence increases world over. There could be chances that physical disciplining, which is a no-no, maybe in the increase in households. So if you are inclined to physical discipline your child, please know that it is not indicated at all, and that there are other positive discipline methods that you can learn from easily by doing a web search, not to go to the level of physically disciplined children. And finally, you as an adult to be a role model. Are you the role model of an adult that you want your child to see? So, for example, are you the father or mother that helps the older neighbor down the road with bringing some vegetables to that lady or gentleman? Or are you the father or mother who runs behind the vegetable and the fruit truck, buys for themselves, and then comes home and doesn't think of anybody else? Are you the father or mother who collects money from friends and collects it and makes food parcels and give it to the other neighbors who are not that wealthy? Which person are you? Because a child is looking at you, not really looking at you like that, but he's making a mental note of how my parents are. And that is his worldview. And he will grow into the kind of person you were when you were an adult. So you being a role model is so important to a child's mental health. So, Sham, the time is 5. I was wondering whether you want me to kind of stop and take questions. Could you please differentiate the befriending with negative emotions and suppressing it? What's the demarcation of it? Yes. So suppressing is, say, if I were to give an analogy, say you have a glass of water and it's full, then what you do is you keep like a saucer on top of it, and then you turn it the other way around. So as long as you keep the saucer underneath, the water in the glass will be kept well controlled. But if by any chance you take out the saucer, the entire water is going to come out. That's what you call suppressing an emotion, because it's inside of you. It is like a really suppressed inside of you. But the moment something happens to you, it's going to come out. Suppression is not a useful strategy. However, what we refer to as befriending, on the other hand, is quite different. It is where you have the glass of water, you don't try to keep a glass saucer on top of it, you just keep it open upwards. It's out there. It's there. It's not as if you're going to hold on to it, you're not going to throw it, it's just there. So befriending, on the other hand, is being aware of the uprising of a negative emotion in yourself, whether it's unhappiness or jealousy or irritability or anger or revenge, but you don't try to cover it up. Rather, you're fully aware that it's there, but you also don't try to grow it further. You also don't act on it either. It's just there. It's like keeping some water on your hand. You're not doing anything to it. That's what you call befriending. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Priyanjali. So any more questions? Anything you want clarifications on? Right. In the absence of any questions,
one of the things that I would...
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sorry, Sam.
Yeah, no,
I just want to tell that, just to say that situations like this could be a great opportunity for psychological growth, because, it's like a diamond, isn't it? A diamond is under great pressure, becomes a diamond, but you need to have the right circumstances so that the diamond, which is not a diamond before, becomes a diamond. So if we have the proper psychological strategies utilized during this time, and you keep on utilizing them over time, at the end of the pandemic, you will see great positive changes in your mind, and you would come out of this as a very strong, psychologically resilient person. In psychology, there is a word for it called post-traumatic growth. Because of a traumatic situation, you've grown rather than being further stressed. So this is opportunity in that sense. There's also one question. There are many low-income people who earn on a daily basis. With this pandemic are helpless. Some do not want to show it to the others. At a situation like this, how can we help? So it's a difficult situation in the sense that we don't know that in countries where they're economically okay, and then the country per se is giving, amount of money or whatever, those people, because they are looked after, the stresses that are associated with socioeconomic problems, or sorry, the economic problems are lesser. Because we do know that two contributors to mental health in the society, societal contributors are poverty and inequality. So, on top of the actual financial strain, financial issues could also give rise to psychological problems. So, coming to your particular question, people who are going through financial issues because they are low income, but they do not show it to the others, how do we help? I suppose that can be done mostly individually. So what I have done is, I'll just share it with you. Now, we all know people in our lives who we know may not be able to tide through this time comfortably. They may be self-employed or they may be pensioners. So what I done was, some of the people that I do know, I had contacted them initially and I've told them very confidentially, just let me know. Of course, they won't tell you, but if you persist and they know that you're sincere and genuine, some of these people, and actually in two occasions, actually two groups of people, actually did say that they have some issues. So you can make some online transfer, and there are ways in. These people, of course, didn't live in Colombo. They were in other areas where they had access to going and taking out that money, which helped. So in our own capacity, if we can do that, that is identifying people that we think may be having financial issues because we do know their social circumstances, connecting to them and assuring them of our interest and desire to help them, and then helping may be one way of doing it, really. Yeah. There's another one. You spoke with so much clarity, so I don't have questions. Thank you for showing both the practical manifestation of the strategy and the logic behind it. Thank you. And yes, those are the questions. Sham, you had something to say before?
Yeah, Pianjali, so what's the take-home message if you had to give me just a sentence or two before we conclude? What would we be?
Well, there's another one. Can I take that question?
Yes. Could you mention some Could you mention some strategies to cope with the sense of guilt or adequateness that's felt with not being able to do something positive, that is, help people in need at a time like this?
Yeah, I think we all feel it now. For example, on most days I get up and I look at my life and I think, well, my life hasn't drastically changed from what has happened. I'm just going through because financially it's okay. I have a house. I have great university system that is really supportive to us. I have friends. Things are okay, but we know that for many, many people in the world, things are not okay. So I think Reuters have said that subsequent to this pandemic, 100 million people, 100 million more people will be pushed down the poverty line all over the world. And then, what can we do? And then if you look at our own circles, we look out and think, well, what can we do? So what I try to tell myself is, well, I can't help the whole world. I can't do that because it's not possible, because it has to be done through a system. And even if such a system is created, the complexities are so great. Like, for example, the pre-pandemic also, there was so much of inequality, there's so much of famine, there's so many bomb blasts going on around the world historically. That is the nature of life for humans. So that's a truth. So I remind myself that facet. Then I look at, well, what can I then do of helping? So what I try to do is during this time, if there's anybody who reaches out to me, whether it's through Facebook, because being a psychologist, people connect all the time asking for advice, want to get a referral to somebody, or even calling up my aunts and uncles just to say that things are okay with them. So I try to do my best in my own capacity. So remember, I spoke about having certainty in our lives, having a locus of control. So I would know the extent to which I can intervene, and I will try to broaden that extent daily. But all the while knowing the reality of life is I can't help everybody. I couldn't have helped everybody pre-pandemic because of the world structures. I can't help people, everybody during the pandemic, but within my own circle, I will give my best. But I'll also know that some days I don't have the capacity to give my best. But I know that overall I've done it, and that makes me feel better. That guilt is much lesser. So coming to your question, Sham, about what is the take-home message in our webinar, is that I feel that if poverty and inequality are two great social diseases that could compound the psychological strain of something like a pandemic. But if we are not in that situations of poverty and inequality, still this entire change in what we know as normal can have a psychological impact. Though it may have a psychological impact, it doesn't mean that we have to live with it. It means that there are psychological strategies to help our mind to overcome any difficulties you may have, as well as tide through this. Some of the key psychological strategies I've spoken to you about. So practice it. If there's only one strategy you are going to practice from all of the ones that I spoke to you about, choose living in the present moment. That is the most key one. And then as you keep on practicing them, as the pandemic situation unfolds and we tide things through because everything passes, you will see that you actually come out as a stronger person at the end of the day. So work with that intention in mind. That's what you would think is the take-home message.